There we go. Usually it takes Andrew Greenhill to remind me, but I remembered on my own.
I was thinking about it.
I knew you were. I think I got the telepathy there.
Yeah.
So where was I? So portlandphotographers.com, take a look at it. And I wanted to give a special welcome to new members. We have a couple new members who joined in April, Joanna King and Robert Bergstrom. So I think they're both in the meeting here. So welcome to you both. And like a lot of other folks who have joined since COVID, we look forward to meeting you in person eventually and getting to know you at our regular meetings before too long. And a reminder to new members and anyone who is interested, we have a lot of people on our membership roll who on our website just have their name listed. And I wanted to remind people that we would be delighted if they wanted to send in a picture of themselves that we could post next to their name. And we also have the ability to have a few of your images. When a viewer clicks on your name, it'll take them to a little gallery of images that you submit, and we'd be delighted to post those. So if you're wondering why we have this sort of two-tiered membership page with people with portraits and people without, the only reason is we're waiting for you to send in your portraits. So please take advantage of that, and we'd love to put those up for you. So I want to do a few quick announcements, reminding people that Pat Welly and Steve Blair's work is now in the Blue Sky Gallery community drawer that PPF maintains. And I went there this week and took a look at their images. They're really good. And it's also just really nice to take some images and hold them in your hands and look at an actual print. I think we get a little, you know, it's been difficult looking at electronic images for the last year. And so it's a great experience just to go to the gallery, open the drawer and pick up some prints and look at them. So they've got some great images in there, and I encourage you to make an appointment online. It's easy to do, and pop down there to see their work. We have another member, Tyler Green. I don't know if he's on the call this evening, but he's got a wonderful show there called The Missing Forest that's in the Northwest Drawer collection there, and really neat pictures. So there's 3 members that you can go and see at Blue Sky Gallery right now, so I encourage you to do that. And then I wanted to mention the 2021 book project that Pat Welly and her team has been working on. The theme of the book is A Break in the Clouds. In some ways, it's sort of a companion book to last year's book about you know, the COVID experience, called Closing Doors, Opening Windows. And the new book will be very similar in terms of the format, the form of the book. Anyway. So I encourage everybody to start thinking about what they're going to submit in terms of images and text to go along with it for the book. There's about 45 days left to get those submissions in. And if you go to the May 1st newsletter, all the specific details about how to submit pictures, how many you can submit, all of that you can find there. And we'll be putting that out again in a newsletter supplement probably this week. And this book, I think, is going to be really, really interesting. You know, it's going to be all about our collective photographic explorations and impressions as we leave behind and emerge from this very strange 2021. And Carol Isaac has already written the introduction for the book. And so I'm going to ask her to read that to us. And I think it'll serve as a nice inspiration to get us all thinking about, you know, what sort of images we might be able to create for the project. So Carol, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so if you are ready to read, I'm going to go ahead and have you read your wonderful introduction. And I'm going to put up a little, I'm going to share my screen and put up just a little info about the book. So go ahead whenever you're ready.
Okay, I call it re-entry, a break in the clouds. There are different ways that we reckon time. The obvious is by a clock, but others of us mark time by events, anniversaries or memorials. Many of us have had decisive experiences that cause us to define life before and after. The United States demarcated time before and after 9/11. The event changed our outlook, our laws, our sense of whom we are as Americans. The ravages of COVID-19 are also definitive. A year ago, we could not have clearly imagined ourselves continuing to gather as members of Portland Photographers Forum without seeing each other in the flesh for such an extended period of time. But we have persisted as a vibrant group, and we have persisted as photographers. We have had informative meetings with interesting guests online. It has not always been easy. Our spirits have descended and lifted. Photography has been a lifesaver for many of us, continuing to keep us sane and keep us connected to the inside of ourselves and the outside with our peers. We have found new topics to explore, subjects that we had overlooked or otherwise had found previously uninteresting. For some of it, it's been more important to continue to photograph as an activity rather than to photograph a particular subject matter. We have delved into our personal archives and liberated images that we attacked in new ways. We've explored new methods of production. Now we see an opening in the clouds. There are hints we are breaking out, and we want to share our photographs with you. Thanks for opening our pages and delving into our explorations, for sharing the parting of the clouds.
Thank you so much, Carol. It's very nice. Let me get back to Zoom and unshare, stop share.
Okay,
Very nice.
thank you.
Doug, can I just interject here quite briefly? Thank you again, Carol. That was very nice. I'm glad you were able to read that as motivation to everybody to photograph. Just as a slightly added incentive, I would like to show a few of these photos at the next June meeting. So, I know the meeting is, or I know the deadline is June 30th, but any that I have ahead of time, I'll probably be showing a few of them at the beginning of the next meeting.
Yeah, that's great. And then that's sort of additional incentive for the early birds to start getting their images in, and then we'll all be able to sort of get a sense of how the book is developing, which would be great. I think this book is going to be a real kind of a historical document, a lot like last year's book was. The foreword for last year's book was written by the executive director of the Oregon Historical Society. And that book is now in their archives and part of the documentation of that year, last year. And I think this book will be equally interesting to a lot of people in Portland and beyond. So I just encourage all of you to contribute, and it would be great to have as many members have images in there as possible. Okay, so
Doug?
Yes.
Can I just say one more thing? I'm also on the book committee, everybody.
Yeah, go ahead,
And,
Brian.
Our last meeting, we sort of had a discussion about inspiration and what it might get. It's right now we're kind of shy on photographs. I think people are either busy or struggling possibly with the theme, but we did have a discussion of inspiration beyond the, struggle of fitting an idea around a theme such as a break in the clouds. And it really is an opportunity for you to use your imagination beyond just looking up in the sky and seeing a literal sunshine as we move into summer and capturing that for a book in a very literal sense. But the inspiration will hopefully be one of hope. You know, for example, if you were a street photographer and that's what your focus was, the idea of when we went into COVID-19 last March is very different in terms of the way it looks coming out of it. And there are, you know, signs that we may be getting part of our lives back, and being the challenge of capturing, for example, that image of just what things look like, you know, both difficult still, but hopefully you know, a true life's break in the clouds would be a nice way to capture that. So just as you're thinking about what your favorite topic is, whether it's landscape photography or nature or you know, abstract, just the representation of that, hopefully will the theme of breaking the clouds will serve as inspiration. So that's all I wanted to say about that.
Yeah, well said, Brian, and thanks for chiming in. That was a better description than I could give, so I appreciate that. Great. We have a possible photo outing on Saturday, May 29th. Gary, are you prepared to say anything about that, or should we put that in the newsletter later this week? I swear I saw Gary check in.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm here.
Okay.
Yeah, I will say it's not on the 29th.
Oh, okay.
We're going to Shriner's Iris Garden. And I was out there and talked to him. One, that 29th is part of Memorial Day weekend.
Right.
Two, on weekends, Shriners is mobbed. And they're doing it, they're having people, because of COVID and stuff, come in 2-hour intervals. Although if it's not crowded, you can stay later, longer than 2 hours. So I'm going to move it back to like Tuesday or Wednesday, which are the days they have the fewest people there, so that if we want to stay longer, we can. And also simply because if we're trying to photograph, you don't want umpteen other people wandering around, you know, getting in your way and everything.
Makes sense. So do you have a date in mind, or should we roll that out like in a newsletter supplement? I was going to get to you like, and have, you know, like tomorrow. Okay, that's fair.
It's going to be either Tuesday or Wednesday. And they also are, in the past, it's been free. They've gone to a thing now where they're charging a nominal fee. If you get there first thing in the morning, like gates open at 7 o'clock, it's $10 a person. If you wait till after 9 o'clock, it's $5 a person. I'm obviously going to be there early, and that's when it's nicest and the fewest people and everything.
Okay.
But you can pick your, you know, pick whatever time you want, and you have to go to the Shriners Gardens website and follow their buttons to, you know, buy the tickets on the website.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Well, you and I will get together and put out a little announcement with the details, but just wanted to let people know that that is coming.
Yeah. And Shriners is an absolute gorgeous, you know, beautiful place of several acres of display gardens. We went there a couple of years ago, and if any of you, I know Pete Gamina and some others here tonight were there, and can, support me in that it is an absolute gorgeous place to spend a morning photographing.
And it had rained the night before, so everything was covered in little drops of water. It was great.
Yeah, I'm trying, but I can't guarantee that this year.
Wow, Gary.
All right, thanks, Gary. Two more things I'm going to mention real quick, and then we're going to get to the photo challenge and our speakers. So just wanted to mention that the website has some significant changes happening, and I encourage everyone to take a look if they haven't been there for a while. Ray Bittigan and Pat Rose, who are on our board, are featuring the work of 4 different members each month, and they've renamed what used to be the main gallery the PPF Artist Exhibitions, which is really cool. So we have this month, Randy Rosenfield, Barry Frankel, Bruce Leonard, and Andrew Greenhill have 10 of their images each on that exhibition. And next month it'll be another 4 members, and Ray and Pat tend to rotate in the images from 4 new members each month. And it's really great to take a look at it. The images are all fabulous, and they not only are in the exhibition page, but they also roll across the banner on our landing page. So it gives our web page a much more dynamic feel. So I encourage everybody to take a look at that, and give Ray and Pat a thank you for the hard work they've been putting in on that. And then finally, just wanted to mention the Ansel Adams in Our Time exhibition at the Portland Art Museum. If you haven't seen that yet, you really need to. It's phenomenal. I went last week and took a look, and the thing that immediately impressed me is how large the exhibition is. It's a lot of images, a lot of Ansel Adams original prints, as well as many other photographers sort of focused on the environment and in many different ways. So I would just encourage you to take that in. I think it's its only West Coast appearance, so we're sort of blessed to have that here. Okay, and with that, I am going to share my screen once again, and we are going to see this slideshow of the monthly challenge images. And it does have a soundtrack, so if you like some music with your pictures, turn up your volume when this gets rolling here. Oops. Sorry about that.
Nice job, Doug. You're on mute.
Anyway, thank you, Brian. It was an amazing collection of photos for a monthly challenge. I was really impressed with the work that was sent in. So this is a great group of photographers, I guess. So thanks again. And with that, I think I'm going to make sure I've got the screen sharing enabled. And Pete Gomina, if you are ready, we would love to see your images.
Excellent. I'm as ready as I'm going to.
Thanks.
So, share screen.
While he's getting queued up there, just a reminder to Pete and Brian, you've got about 15 minutes each to keep us on schedule. So
No worries. So I titled this Time and Motion Studies, and really what it's about, it was funny, Carol started off to talking about our perceptions of time. And I've always been fascinated in making long exposure photographs. But looking back at my archives, I haven't done that much of it. And it's one of my favorite ways of adding a different dimension to what I'm doing. There's of course, all kinds of ways to go about doing that. And I, along with, I think 5 or 6 of the rest of our PPF members, were part of Mark Kohler's workshop on long exposure photography a month or so ago, a couple months ago now. And that was really an eye-opener. And in the past, most of my work has been with film cameras and with a view camera or other cameras and slow film. It's fairly easy at the right time of day to create a long exposure photograph. This is probably about 7 or 8 seconds of time. But I found that sometimes that was about the limit of anything I could do repeatedly and accurately. And it was kind of a real chore and usually a big waste of film to try to do it repeatedly, especially if like some of us jumping around from house to house, place to place, don't always have access to a darkroom. So it was something that I struggled with for a long time.
Hey,
Hey,
Pete,
Pete, are we supposed to be looking at something? Because I don't think you're sharing your screen. I don't know if you
Oh,
know.
I hit the share the screen button. Interesting. Okay, hang on.
there's two buttons.
Oh, well, I'll go back and start over again. Share screen. Right. Oh, I've got to go in from here. Ah,
There we go.
okay. Well, I've blathered on a bit then. Oh, let's get started again. Oops. Escape. That was all set to go. All right, is that better?
Yep.
Okay, now we got it.
Yes.
So, tried and true, big camera, slow film, long exposure, you get that feeling of motion and time. It's one of the things I've been trying to really work to get a different element into my photographs over time. Water, of course, is plentiful, available, and is often moving. It's an easy thing to photograph. And by now, all of us know that, if you've got an exposure of a quarter second or longer, you're going to start getting being able to draw the shape of the water out to a flowing feeling. That's all well and good. Even a slower exposure that's maybe, this is, I think, about a 50th of a second, the wind was blowing pretty well. And I didn't want to make a picture of grass. I wanted a picture of moving grass. I wanted a sense of the wind blowing. And so I intentionally tried to get some movement into this picture. PPF outing a couple of years ago to Warrenton, Columbia River. This doesn't really give you an idea of how fast that water was moving. Some of those pilings were moving with the tide running out. It was, I think there were about 5 of us out there, 5 or 6 of us out there photographing at this spot. It was really fascinating. And it started reinvigorating my desire to try to put a little more movement into pictures. Logically, I tried pinhole photography to try to draw out time a little more. And with this particular camera, slow-ish film, I think this is FP4 plus. On a bright day, it's about a 4-second exposure in broad daylight, depending on the size of your camera. Which is about what this was. It's 4, 5, 6 seconds or something like that, but I wanted more. And I did quite a bit of this work right around this time. This is, I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago now. And it was getting better and better. I was liking more of what I was getting. This is the koi pond at the Swan Island Dahlias down in Canby. Troy thought I had something to feed them. I did not.
It looks like the Kraken.
Evening, of course, is a good time to be doing long exposures. I was more interested, I didn't want to freeze the people. I didn't want to see who these particular people were. I wanted an impression of people. So using a pinhole camera, I was forced to make impressions of people, and I liked what I got in this case. Oops. Things in motion, even during daylights or just early evening lights, some of these sorts of things with lights and motion, you can draw it out pretty well. Pinhole photography again, when people are in motion, but something else, things around them are not. It's a lot of fun. Astronomical events with pinhole camera. Everybody's made star trails probably, and we've all seen some of the PPF members work with photographs made of the Milky Way at night. Well, if you don't have the option of making an astronomically, shall we say, correct photograph that freezes the stars of the galaxies in place, it opens up other sorts of visions. This is one I made with a pinhole camera during the eclipse. And there you see it. That's the eclipse. This was made with a 16 by 20 inch sheet of photographic paper in a great big cardboard tube. I left the camera open for about 2 hours, I think. Photographic paper, ISO of about 2 or 3 or something like that. And I think I put some extra neutral density in there because I was going to be shooting at the sun. And you can't see the eclipse at all, but there it is. It's the eclipse nonetheless. During Mark Kogler's workshop, he was talking about, well, you know, some things work and some things don't when you're making photographs. Now, the previous images were all made either with a view camera or a film camera or a pinhole camera. This past year, big changes came through. I sold all my view cameras and most of my film cameras and bought a digital camera. And wow, pretty fascinating. This is, I regard as one that didn't work very well because it looks like a panning shot of a speedboat going by instead of a bunch of fishermen plunked down in the Willamette River. Win some, you lose some, but it was interesting to see what happened. This was only down around 3 seconds. I was surprised. That river was really moving along. This is the one from a workshop that I felt actually worked for me. This is about an 8-minute exposure. It was a heavily overcast day, but the clouds were moving. I did a test exposure about 1 minute, nothing was happening. I said, okay, well, we'll put some more neutral density in front of the lens and we'll stretch it out to 8 minutes. And I finally got something that was working pretty well. So that was a great learning experience, taking that little workshop. And now I can inject a little more time into my photographs, more feeling of time. Part 2 this evening. We'll talk about weight. And I'm not talking about weight put on during COVID. I'll skip that subject for now. But one of the things I remember years ago looking at, I have a couple of books of Edward Weston's photographs, looking at one of his compositions of stone formations at Point Lobos. And he had filled the frame with most of this formation. It looked like a wave sweeping across the frame. There's a little border around the edge where the subject wasn't, which gave it a great deal of weight. And I thought about that over time, and how do you create the feeling of weight and volume in a photograph? So I found that, yes, indeed, if you leave just a very slim amount of not subject in your subject, suddenly you can create a pretty good impression of size and weight. One of the problems photographing the redwoods, of course, is that they're so enormous, you can't see all of one tree at once. And I remember reading in some of Ansel Adams' books, they try to give an impression of weight, show some, figure out a way to give an impression of the massiveness of something. And again, really filling up the frame with the subject or the object and letting it dominate the space. If you back up and take a picture of the same spot, you've got a picture of a cliff. Here you've got some sort of feeling of the weight of the object. See, I'm going to keep this under 15 minutes. We're rocketing through this, baby. And finally, let's talk about toys.
Mhm.
One of the advantages of working at Blue Moon Camera and Machine, where I sit in the back of the warehouse and the guys up front bring me all of the outtakes from consignments and donations and all sorts of stuff that comes in through the front door. And one of the advantages to me getting to see all this stuff is I get to play with all of the cameras that aren't good enough to sell up front, and we get all kinds of things. My favorite, and actually I had this one before I went to work for Blue Moon, but it fits right into that genre, is little plastic Diana F+ Aviator, which of course has a plastic lens. It has the advantage of being able to be focused. It has 2 speeds, instant, somewhere around 100th of a second, and B, couple of apertures, and yes, you can actually focus it. You can't see what you're focusing, but you're focusing it. And it has it gives the most lovely rendering of things sometimes. Focus isn't always exact. Sharpness is relative. A lot of fun to play with. You get a pretty good vignette around some of the images, especially the farther away you are from the subject. You can really get a pretty good vignette going. Like that. This little jewel, you can find, they show up on eBay fairly regularly, and you can get one for about 20 bucks. They were made 30s and 40s, I think. Various plants would make these. I think they were contracted all over Chicago. Little Bakelite cameras. They make a half frame image on 127 film. And boy, are they terrible. I don't know how anybody ever could have bought one of these things, but boy, do they do cool stuff. Focus, the middle of the frame is never in focus. With this particular camera, everything around the middle tends to be in focus, but I've yet to find a spot where really the middle of the picture is really in focus. They're terrible little cameras, but
yeah, finish up.
They're fun to play with. One of the disadvantages to 127 film is that there is no color film available, no color print film available. You can get black and white print film. You can get, this is reverse process. This is slide film that's been cross-processed in C41. You get all the really wild colors and lots of contrast. However, Film for Classics has now brought out 127 re-rolled Kodak Portra 400 and 160. So if you've got a 127 camera around, you've always wanted to use some color film in it, they're going to come back to life. Terrible focus, but really kind of cool images. I can't figure which came first, the instructions of where to put the post or the post. This will probably take some of us back to our childhoods. The Girl Scout brownie was pretty much the same picture, same camera, little bitty 127 again. Camera that there is some focus in there somewhere, but I think that the only thing this camera could really take pictures of would be groups of people standing about 15 feet away. I kind of gave up on this because the pictures were either not good enough to do anything with or too good. And of course, the Venerable Holga. I don't use this very much, but I found my fun way to do it is to put a little tiny flash on it and take it to a party. Shoot it with the shutter on B so that you've got some ambient light and a little shake going on, and then the flash will freeze part of the image. That's fun. I could be a hipster too. That's it. End of the show.
Thanks, Pete.
Thanks for listening.
That was really, really good. A lot of fun with those old cameras. All right, Brian, are you ready to queue up?
Yeah, I just think he's got to stop sharing. Peter's got to release.
I don't even see my screen here.
It's above.
Oh, there you are. I am. There we go. Stop the share.
Nice. See if I can get this.
Well, he's getting going. Peter, I've known you a long time. It's great to see all those pictures and listen to you talk about them.
Thanks.
Glad to see you doing that.
Yes. I will continue along with my new digital toy. It's fun.
Indeed.
And Pete, I was with you at that workshop with Mark Kurgel. I'm glad you agreed that it was an outstanding event.
It was great. A lot of good information, and really could, in a short period of time, you really set us down the path to exploring some of those techniques. It was great.
Yeah.
Peter, I have to say that I really liked the shot that you didn't like of the fisherman on the river.
Oh, yeah.
I love that.
Thanks. I didn't like it only because it wasn't doing what I was hoping it would do. It did something else, but surprise, surprise. You never know what you're going to get sometimes.
Happy accidents.
Right.
All right. So I don't have nearly the breadth and experience of many of the photographers here. I'm just sort of getting started in the last couple of years. I've always been an artist, and I've actually in another life was a musician. So I've always been a creative, and only recently picked up the camera. Back in 2019, my father actually bought and sold cameras back in Chicago. Everything from old large format Leicas the type that you see Ansel Adams pictures made of. I don't know anything other than what I've seen. I'm not a camera expert or a gear expert, but and helped my dad build a darkroom once, but I never really took an interest in the craft of it until just recently. And I withheld all these images because I decided I was going to do the submission for the monochrome, but I realized, I'm speaking tonight, so all my photos are in black and white, so I might as well just hold them all back. So that's why I didn't submit anything. But I used to live in Portland, and it was actually a trip to Italy when I bought my first camera back in 2019, and I took about 3 weeks and did the tourist thing, and I got myself a decent Sony camera. And then I came back and I started to go, wow, I really like taking pictures. And I started focusing on architecture and street photography. So I'm kind of a person who just likes composition and texture and contrast. So when I see things like the Tillicum Bridge, for example, I'm not the kind of photographer who likes to step back to something like that. I like to find the angle that interests me and what I would like to see if it were, made into a piece of art or a picture that I would want to hang. So that's pretty much how I approached this when I went to the bridge for the first time and the only time that I photographed it. And I got a bunch of different images in different perspectives, but I really liked this particular one. I really liked just the really heavy contrast and I thought it turned out really good in grayscale. You can all see this, right? I just want to make sure.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Shoot. Supposed to be able to go forward here. Hold on. This was taken around town, right around the building that I worked in when I was working downtown. And again, I like perspective. I liked the way the buildings cement, I guess you'd call it tiles, were cascading up, and this guy just happened to be washing windows, and just taking this and playing with it in grayscale and putting the worker off to the edge. I kind of designed that in the frame before I took the picture, and I was literally hovered up against the building when I took it to try and get just an interesting perspective on the task at hand that this guy was involved in. So just me taking my camera. This was taken probably early 2020, only a couple of months after I'd gotten back from Italy, and I was just exploring, and really like black and white too. I've got obviously, like most of you, I like color photographs, but I think black and white is just something that's really interesting, or monochrome anyway. Not everything is straight black and white here. I think there's a little bit of silver tone, but mostly desaturated. A little bit of my street photography. I like to sort of stay in the shadows, stay in the background, and capture moods when I can. And in this particular perspective, I knew that everything was sort of, blasted in terms of exposure and stuff, but there was just something intimate about how dark everything was in the foreground and how bright everything was in the background as I worked with it. And I literally got almost down on my knees when I noticed they were in front of me, and it just turned out better than I actually expected. There's a couple of large trees, I think, actually right to the left of those folks that gave me a nice blast of light right where their feet are on the ground, and it just sort of goes out into the opening, almost a break in the clouds, if you will. It's kind of an image to me, an image of hope and moving forward. This next image was, I take the bus every day, or I did when I lived downtown, and it was always interesting that the lines and different perspectives. And when somebody with a hat like that sits down, it's hard not to notice how interesting composition could be made with her as sort of the centerpiece. But I thought this turned out really nice. There's a lot of different, again, contrast, a lot of darks and lights, and a few spots that are overexposed, but intentional in some respects. So I really like that. And this is This is the MAX train. This was right at the time that COVID kind of started to take hold, and there wasn't really anybody around. And I was working downtown before our office closed, and happened to get on the one train that was going around, and got this picture when it was completely empty. And I just thought, wow, it looks really cool in black and white. Just a typical Max car, but just looking down and through it, you can appreciate with all the different textures and just the way this thing was designed. Looks really, to me, it looks really interesting. And dabbled a little bit into night photography as well. I find it kind of difficult. I'm not real good with the equipment and knowing how to set certain things, but a lot of times I do get sort of happy accidents. And this particular night, just the way this was focused and framed, and with the overexposed lights and just the way the bus inside is sort of bright and everything else is just sort of contrasted around it, I thought looked really cool. So then I moved, decided to sell my house eventually, and I moved to the coast and kept my camera with me, and started to fall in love with the landscape. I actually moved to Manzanita, Oregon, where I live now full time, and realized that there's just so much for me just out my back door for me to explore. But I tried to keep the same, I guess it's just part of my style, I guess, is just this idea of composition and lines, color and texture, and also just unique angles to things that bring more to the frame and more interest. This is a shot in the Neahkahnie Bay, super low tide, and I just thought it was just a great image. My camera is actually almost, it's probably only about 2 or 3 inches off the ground, taking this photo straight out into the bay, out to about 200 yards. There's just practically sand and rocks, which was really cool that day. And clouds and stuff just looked amazing. Shoreline of Manzanita is often loaded with just, I mean, every day seems to offer something different. And then this particular day, there was just an overt amount of foam. And I probably took about 50 photographs looking like a madman with my camera running, literally chasing the foam as it receded, and then having the ocean chase me back while I'm, again, huddled as close as I could get to the ground, because I thought the perspective looked really cool the closer I got to this foam. But if you stand over it, it doesn't look great. If you get near it, you can really see the texture of it a little bit more clearly. And that day, just the drama in the sky was just catching all of this in just a fantastic way. And just the way, I don't know, I don't think I had this in any sort of long exposure, but the sand also was just like glass with all this amazing reflection from above. So I really like that photo as well. I'm not sure if this particular photo is successful or not, but there's so much of this, there's so much photography that goes on the coast with, with Cannon Beach and Haystack Rock and stuff. But there was just something cool that day about how this, the contrast of what the white tips. And I think that day it was just very obvious that a lot of birds parked themselves up there. So it was super white for obvious reasons. And I played pretty heavily with the contrast and worked this photo a little bit to make it look a little bit more interesting and ominous, and just tried to create a real diversity of grayscale to try and make this look interesting. And again, always looking for great different angles and opportunities. That's Neocani Mountain. For about 2 months, I did a study where I was out just about every day in many of the same spots, looking to see if I can capture Neocani Mountain in different, different lighting and different clouds. Obviously, things just change constantly. And in this particular day, there was heavy fog, yet there was light coming through off the ocean. And it just blasted the most amazing shadows, and yet the mountain was still fairly visible. And I can't remember if this was, I think this was like right around sunset. So I was able to get something really pretty special, I think, as far as mood goes with lighting and everything. It's one of those opportunities, shots. This is Short Beach. It's over by Oceanside, very Cannon Beach-like, but there's some really cool caves and some different things here that you don't get as much, or you don't get it as much in Cannon Beach as here. There's a lot of little features of rock sticking out, and it was just a fantastic day. And as you can see, once again, my style is to sort of capture a real wide, hopefully a wide array of contrast and grayscale, just looking for opportunities for things to sort of pull together, look painterly. That's kind of what I go for when I'm doing these black and white images. This one is Arch Cape. This was, I think, right near high tide is sort of receding, and most of the water is now coming back, and it's almost like a river that's going around the corner to the right, which you can't see, but it just looked amazing with the way the light beam was shining through. And again, I went pretty low to try and capture the patterns in the water and just spread everything out. I really like the mood of this particular photo in the background with all the different atmospheric layers. You've got the clouds, obviously, you've got an aggressive sun break in just one spot, but everything is sort of dark and mysterious. And at the same time, off to the right, you can, it sort of blends and, hopefully walks through. I thought about cropping this a little more to take a little bit of the water out. It was a little unbalanced, but there wasn't anything that looked right. So I just sort of left it, because I think that the balance of the gray and the dark and the light sort of work. But anyway, this is pointing right at Cannon Beach, although you can't see Haystack Rock. And this was an opportunity, again, low tide, leaving a lot of water just spread out all over the beach. And I just like the subtle texture underneath the water. The water is only about a ½ inch deep, and it just creates these great trails and off into the sort of the abyss. I think this is also a walk along the Arch Cape tree line. It's up high. I got a couple of shots when the sun was blasting through the trees. I thought it looked really great as a black and white image, just because of the opportunity of just focusing on the rays rather than the myriad of colors that was actually there. I found this photo to be way more interesting as a black and white photo than it was as a color photo. It was a little too kind of all over the place in color. So this sort of pulled it all together. And then I had another opportunity along the same walk where there was this really cool eagle looking for food sitting off to the edge, and that same sunbreak was blasting through and atop the trees. And I purposely placed him on the right edge just so you could stare at the picture and then sort of realize that the eagle almost looks like he's overseeing the whole sort of empire of what he was there to do. So I just really enjoyed that that photo opportunity. I probably took about 2 or 3 pictures from different angles, and this one just straight on looked the best.
Hey, Brian.
Yeah.
I'm gonna kind of rush you along if that's okay. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I've only got a few left. Thanks. This is Neocani Bay again. I started incorporating people more into my shots too, opportunities to kind of bring back the street photography in me. But this one is just out to the ocean. Really cool shot. Same with this is short sand or short beach again. I just liked the people that sort of give it perspective. This was Cannon Beach. Again, opportunity to just do some candid stuff. These 3 surfers were coming off the shore, and I just thought that the 3 were just a nice balance in the photo. But then this photo happens to be one of my favorite of all time. This next one that I took, these 3, same 3, I got around the other side of them, and it was just the most amazing shot I've ever seen. I turned the camera on them, and when I got home, I couldn't believe the shot I had. So it's just amazing all around. I just think it's really a different way of seeing Cannon Beach, for sure, especially in black and white. But what it sort of pulled everything together that I enjoy in a photograph. So anyway, thank you for your attention.
Thanks, Brian. That was awesome.
Nicely done.
Very nice. Yeah. And sorry to rush you through, but I'm not doing the greatest job of time management, so we're gonna try to keep moving here. I appreciate it.
Good job on the God's light for those. The landscape photographers like to call that streaming light God's light, right, Pete?
Nice. I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's why I was telling you.
Cool. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. So I'm going to introduce Jeff Curto a little bit here. He is Professor Emeritus of Photography he is Professor Emeritus of Photography at College of DuPage in Glen Ellen, Illinois, where he taught from 1984 to 2014. He holds a Bachelor's of Fine Arts degree from Illinois Wesleyan University and a Master of Fine Arts degree from Bennington College in Vermont. He was named an Apple Distinguished Educator in 2013, and since 2009, he's led annual photography workshops in Italy. He currently maintains his own fine art photography business, and his work is held in numerous private and corporate collections. You may view more of Jeff's work at his website, jeffcurto.com, and on Instagram at jcurto. He also hosts 2 popular podcasts about photography. His podcast titled History of Photography is archived at photohistory.jeffcurto.com. And his Camera Position podcast, which discusses creative aspects of photography, can be found at cameraposition.com. So please welcome Jeff Curto.
Hey, thanks. Can everybody hear me? Just make sure we're square. All right, cool.
We can hear you, Jeff, and I just want
Perfect.
to know, feel free to go over 10 or 15 minutes. We want to give you the full hour. All
right.
With that, it's all yours.
Well, let me share my screen here. Let me play this. So hopefully this will play, right? You got it in your screen now, my little presentation. All right, cool. So thank you for inviting me to come talk to your group. I really am. This is an impressive crowd to talk to. I've been stalking a lot of you, and from your website, great website, amazing work that you guys have on there. I know that I follow a number of you on Instagram, which is awesome to see the work that you're doing there. Thanks especially to Walt Duddington for inviting me to speak. And I'd like to just point out that you know, coming to speak to you, I actually put on a shirt with buttons and I'm wearing pants. So, you know, this is post-pandemic stuff at its finest. So, I'm here to talk about the creative process and how it works and how you can generate new ideas for your photography. And I hope that by the end of what I'm going to do here, which is going to move fairly quickly, but I hope that by the end of what I'm going to do, you'll have some ideas about how to sort of strategize an approach to photography that enables you to create new and exciting projects. So we're going to cover these 4 items. I'll do a little introduction to myself, which you'll see why in a second. Some tools and some concepts for us to wrap ourselves around. We'll talk about generating ideas, and we'll talk about how you can shape your creative vision, a few practical considerations, then hopefully at the end we'll have time for some Q&A. A quick introduction. Hello, my name is Jeff, and I'm a photographer. And because I'm a photographer like you, I think it's kind of important for you to have some sense of where I'm coming from and what it is that I've done in photography, so that you have some idea of, you know, what's going on and where I'm coming from with what I want to talk to you about. A sort of like an interesting aspect of my lifetime in photography, and I started doing photography at the age of 8, started making money with photography at the age of 14, and I've done all of these jobs and more. I have a kind of panoply of opportunities that present themselves to me from all of these different kinds of things. And one of the things that I thought was really interesting about this that I hadn't thought of at the time in my early life was that all of these things ended up making me more employable as a photographer. And that employability led me to this teaching gig that I had at a community college. It's about a 25, 30,000 student community college in the Chicago suburbs, so it's quite large. At the time that I was there, we had somewhere in the neighborhood of 450 or so photo students in my program that I was the chair of and sort of wrangled into being a very modern photo program. And I did that from 84 to 2014. And then amazingly, at the end of that tenure there, I was asked to be an adjunct instructor for this amazing program in Cortona, Tuscany. It's the Under the Tuscan Sun town, for those of you who've seen the movie or better yet, read the book. And the University of Georgia has a campus there, and I spend 3 months annually teaching a semester of photography there. So that's been great. And in 2009, as was mentioned, I started teaching photo workshops in Italy, and we got, as with everybody else, skunked last year. But we're still hoping to. It seems like we're going to be able to run the workshops that I have scheduled for September and October of this year, and we're already planning for the next 2 or 3 years ahead. So, and those experiences are kind of a culmination of all the other things that I've done. So in combination with the workshops that I do and the University of Georgia gig that I have, I spend roughly 4 months out of the year in Italy, which is a pretty great thing. And I started traveling to Italy way back in 1989. Actually, I had traveled there when I was a teenager, but kind of a different sort of a circumstance. But I started traveling there in 1989, and out of that experience, on which that first trip, which was a honeymoon, and I brought my view camera, which could be why that marriage didn't last, but that's a whole nother story. But I started a project that I didn't really realize was a project at first. And I want you to think about, and I talk about project, right, as kind of keep that in the back of your head. So I called this ultimately Evidence of Hands on Stone, the Italian portfolio. And these were all shot with the view camera. At the beginning of the project, obviously, I was printing these images in the darkroom, but ultimately scanning the negatives, making prints up to 16 by 20, and in some cases quite a bit larger, but I'll talk about that in a second. And I kind of finished up the project in 2013 with a total of 80 images. And I wanted to just show you a couple of these really quickly. Because at first, if you've traveled abroad or really to any kind of location that's exotic to you, at first it's the things that are interesting, the stuff, right? And, I'd been a view camera photographer. I continued to do that work there in Italy. And the buildings, the sculptures, etc., that stuff was interesting to me. But ultimately, what I began to discover was that it was the people who had made these things that I was photographing, sculptural objects, architectural objects, it was those people and their influence on modifying a landscape or a place in some way that was really interesting to me. And what that begat then was me beginning to travel around the peninsula of Italy, really from all the way in the north to all the way down in Sicily. And this is in Sicily, this photograph, and beginning to sort of stalk many of the sculptors, many of the architects whose work I found particularly interesting. So I would do research on who built this, who designed it, how did it get to be like this, why are there Celtic crosses in Italy? All of that stuff began to become like a part of what I was sort of thinking about. And what I began to realize that it was these applications of hands on these stone materials that was ultimately really fascinating to me. So, as an example, here's one of the sculptures on the Ponte San Angelo, the Angel Bridge in Rome, with sculptures designed and produced by Bernini and his studio, Gian Lorenzo Bernini. Of course, Bernini becomes this super important character that then begins to articulate me across the body of work. So what I wanted to sort of talk about this was that in the end, this body of work, as I had mentioned, was 80 images, but it has several different edits of 20, 40, 50, and 80 images, as well as a few very large images, 40 by 60 inch prints that are, very largely matted and framed. And what that's enabled me to do is exhibit this in a bunch of different places. Small places, big places, places that have, a very sophisticated exhibition calendar, and places that don't. So this body of work has been in about 12 or 13, depending on how you define it, solo shows, and 25 group shows. So that project had a huge life, and was also published in Lenswork magazine, and as we'll look at here in a bit, that becomes a sort of an interesting bit in a way, right? So then, I think about this quote by Maslow, the psychologist: the only tool you have is a hammer. You tend to see every problem as a nail. So of course, I was shooting, doing all those jobs that I listed, I was shooting with large format, small format, medium format cameras, because every job needed a different tool. But like all the rest of us, the digital revolution washed over me. I had a huge advantage of being able to start teaching, for example, Photoshop at version 1.5. So I've been involved in that for a long time. That application, by the way, came on one floppy disk. And there were 3 other floppy disks that had the demo images on it so you could learn how to use Photoshop, right? So I think I downloaded an update to Photoshop that was like 500 megabytes or something this evening before our meeting. So this digital revolution, as we all know, freed us up to do a lot of different things that we otherwise might not be able to do. Working in color became much more accessible to us as an art form. You know, certainly I'd worked in color a lot as a commercial photographer, but you know, we wanted to be able to manipulate things and change things, and now we can do that in color. So if that black and white work that I had done from '89 to 2013 was my attempt to tell a kind of epic story on a large scale, I think of these pictures more as short stories, with my objective being to try to tell a story about a place, to create a sense of place, right? So, and I use these images to create short story-based projects, story-oriented projects that I present in various online and printed ways, methods, which we'll discuss more about in a couple of minutes. So that's some stuff about Italy. I also have this other life that I get to lead because I have this amazing opportunity to go to Michigan's Upper Peninsula. The closest big city is Thunder Bay, Ontario, across Lake Superior. And I have access to a house on Lake Superior where I spend summer months, but also since my retirement from full-time teaching, I'm now spending 2 months or so in the wintertime as well. And then this last pandemic time, I actually just got back from here, having spent the last 9 months literally living 15 or 20 yards from this, right? So which is pretty amazing. The digital camera has been my constant companion in this space. We had a pretty mild winter this last winter. We did not have the normal sort of average amount of snow is about 290 inches. We only had 200 inches of snow. The record is 394 inches of snow. It's a peninsula that sticks out into Lake Superior. It's the part of Michigan that's north of Wisconsin. And in a lot of maps, like if you see it on television, you know, like weather shows, they show it as part of Wisconsin. It's actually part of Michigan, and it's a little peninsula that sticks out there, and it's sort of like a snow machine with a huge lake making a lot of snow. So it's been a really wonderful place to be able to spend some winter months. And this I put this in here because it was New Year's Eve, and you know, sort of this hope for something new in this new 2021 year to come. So I counterbalanced this picture with an image of the moon set early in the morning the next morning. So so that's a little bit about this place that I also spend a lot of time photographing, Michigan's Upper Peninsula. And Aurora Borealis, man, it was just an amazing winter for those as well up there. So one of the things that I wanted to just briefly mention is that one of the ways to get these pictures out there for me is I've made ebooks out of them. So this is available on the Apple bookstore, made with what Apple has now sort of pushed this aside, iBooks Author, and instead you can use Pages to do this, to make ebooks and distribute those as well. And this, I've also produced a little body of work called At the Lake's Edge, which is available on the Blurb bookstore. It actually, you know, it's now a Blurb book because it was, what was the name of that magazine option that Blurb bought? Now I don't remember it, but it's on the Blurb bookstore. And I don't sell a ton of these, right? Because I don't really, you know, it's not about selling a lot of them. It's really more about, as we'll talk about, gathering this work into into a particular thing. So the last thing that I wanted to talk about ebooks is this, and I'm going to tell you about this not because you all need it, but rather your buddy, neighbor, friend, Bill. You know, Bill says, hey, to you, I just bought a new camera, or I got a new camera from my kids for Christmas. Can you come over on Saturday and show me everything about how to use it? And you go, it's a little more complicated than that. So this is available for free on the Apple Bookstore. It is a basic photo book. It runs through all of the basics of photography: shutter speed, aperture, parts of a camera, how cameras work, what they do, depth of field, et cetera, focal lengths of lenses. And if you just search for basic photography by me, Jeff Curto, you'll find it. It's used, I don't know actually all of where it's used, but I've had, I think the last time I looked about a month and a half ago, I'd had 28,000 downloads of the thing. So, and it uses all the pictures that I make in the summertime in this part of Michigan. And I kind of made it with that, made these photographs with that in mind. So it's a great resource for you all, for your friends, right? For your friends and neighbors who want you to teach them about photography. So, and the last little body of work that I wanted to show you is one that's still in progress. This town of Cortona, where I get to spend 3 months annually, has become a kind of like, I guess, third home to me. And the people that I have met there have become important to me. And so I've begun a portrait project about these folks that I just wanted to share a few of these with you. And I'm calling it Le Cortonese, the people of Cortona. A lot of times people ask me what brings me back to Italy over and over again. And ultimately, I think it is this sense that in that country, they have never given up their own permission to be human, right? They've decided that it's okay to be human all the time and not be, fake in some way. They're real people. So this is Roberto. He's my fruttovendolo. He's the guy who sells me fruits and vegetables in his little store. And to give you a sense of what this means is, you go into Roberto and you say, I want some peaches. And he looks at you and he says, well, when are you going to eat them? And I said, well, I suppose I kind of want a couple of them for today, but I'd like to be able to have some over the next few days. And so he goes and he finds the right peaches and he puts 2 in one bag and he says, these are for today. And then he puts, 3 or 4 in another bag and he says, these are for the next few days, because he's thinking about what it is that you're going to do with the food that he's going to help you with. The same with Franca, who is behind the deli counter at the teeny tiny little grocery store in Cortona. So that's a little bit about what I do in photography, so that you kind of have some context for where we're going here. So normally when I do this presentation, I do it live, obviously, in a group full of people in a room. And I do this in a sort of different way, but I want to take just a couple of minutes. I usually take like 10 minutes to do this, but I want you to just take a couple of minutes to start a story. Pick one of these prompts that you're looking at on the screen and start a story, like just in your head. You might want to write it down, just start it. Once upon a time, I dreamt I traveled to. If my life were a book, I'd title it. And again, ordinarily I'd give like some time for this and we'd have a little bit of discussion about it, but I've tried this way in online ways, and the discussion part kind of falls a little flat. So, but what I want you to notice is that at first you said, okay, once upon a time I went to Cannon Beach. But ultimately, you began to tell a bigger story in your head. You know, I went to Cannon Beach and I walked around and I saw these things and I saw these rocks and there were reflections in the water and. So that idea of telling a story is a critical and an integral part of what I want to talk to you about tonight, telling a story. So I want to give you some tools and some concepts, talking about what is creativity, where does it come from, how does it work, and how do we nurture it. So let me give you this thing. So what is it? And anybody who's unmuted, just shout out what this is.
Dot.
It's a dot.
It's around to it.
Around to it, get around to it.
A hole in the wall.
A hole in the wall. So once upon a time when I had little kids, I have big kids now, but I had little kids and there was a bunch of them over at the house and I drew a dot and I said, you know, what is this? And one kid said, it's a telephone pole seen from above.
Mm.
And another kid said it was a manhole without the cover on it. Thought that was great. The most interesting one, and this is God's honest truth, my hand to my screen here. One kid said, it's the sun's wicked stepsister. Like, I don't really want that kid's therapy bills later in life, but you know, the sun's wicked stepsister, where did that come from? So the point I want to make is that when we look at it, we see a dot on the screen, but kids whose imaginations are still like there, right, are thinking about it in this sort of crazy way. And they're beginning to think of all the things that it really could be. And what I discovered, and I watched it happen with my kids, and you know, thinking back, I saw it happen with me. Our educational system is designed to nullify creativity at the expense of practical, useful knowledge. Now, nothing wrong with that, right? Because we're all, you know, have at some point been gainfully employed. But unfortunately, some institutions are beginning to recognize that that problem-solving skills, creative problem-solving skills are just as important as the empirical data skills. But in general, our educational priorities, certainly in America and in a lot of other places in the world, are devoted to this. Like, you know, the most important stuff is the math, science, and language. The next most important stuff is the humanities. And somewhere down at the bottom is drama, music, dance, art, and, you know, photography would be in like a tiny, tiny print way at the bottom of that triangle, right? So what we've done in the educational world is prioritize the things that are practical and deprioritize the things that are not so practical. So my goal is to have us kind of figure out how to go around that in a certain way. Because the problem is we get to this point in our lives where what we want to do is be creative. And at some point, somebody says to us, man, oh man, you know, you have a pretty creative mind. And you think, well, I don't really feel that creative. And you think, all I want is my box of crayons back, right? I want to go back to that time where this box of crayons was an infinite set of possibilities, like an infinite possibilities, you know, especially if you got the box with the sharpener on the back, right? You know, so this idea is where I'm kind of headed here. And, you know, another problem is that we kind of end up thinking of ways that we can't be creative. And here's Picasso saying, every child is an artist. The problem is how to remain an artist once he grows up. And I always like to talk about the work of Jacques-Henri Lartigue. Some of you might know about this guy, a photographer in Paris, born into a wealthy family, given a camera at a young age, and made astonishingly good photographs. Most of the great ones that he made were made before he turned 15, right? So, he didn't have any preconceived notions about what photography should be. Anna Freud, Sigmund Freud's daughter, said, creative minds have been known to survive any kind of bad training, so there's hope for all of us, right? There's hope for all of us to be able to be creative anyway. I often hear myths about creativity. I'm not that sort of person. I'm not creative. I'm not a creative type. I'm not clever enough. Creativity is hard. You can't learn to be creative. And I say that those are excuses. Balderdash to all that stuff. It's not true. You can learn to be creative, and you are already that sort of person. You just have to learn to embrace it. So here is my definition of creativity. It's the ability to create new and original things, experiences, and ideas by grasping and nurturing inspiration. I've stuck this photograph by my friend Arno Minkinen in here. I don't know if you know his work. Like one of the most intriguingly creative minds that I am pleased to know. And here we're talking about the idea of grasping and nurturing inspiration, remembering past experiences and ideas, but also forgetting them, destroying past experiences and ideas, but also synthesizing them. And you'll notice that I've given you some opposites there. So creative people tend to be mentally flexible. Engineers, any engineers out there? Oftentimes a lot of engineers in photography, because the tools intrigue engineers. And I'm here to tell you that I've taught a lot of engineer photographers, and they can learn to be creative, those engineers, whoever said yes. So engineers, people who have fixed kinds of ideas, you can learn to be mentally flexible. Critical, somebody who's creative is critical, both positive and negative. And they tend to persist in striving toward goals. They don't let like something just fall to the side. They keep picking it up and putting it back up there and trying again. And they tend to be brave. They tend to be willing to stick their neck out just because. They got nothing to lose, maybe, right? So psychologists have talked about how we have two brains, a left brain and a right brain. And these two brains are in opposition with one another. They're always kind of working against one another. The left brain is logical, sequential, rational. It's analytical, it's objective, and it works in parts. But the right brain is all these other things. It's random, it's intuitive, holistic, it's synthetic, it's subjective, and it works in wholes. And the goal of creative thinking is to sort of push that logical, sequential, rational self over to the side and embrace the random, intuitive, holistic, synthetic side of you. All right? So I found this quote by journalist Robert Wieder, who said, anyone can look for history in a museum, but the creative explorer looks for history in a hardware store, right? So I thought that was pretty interesting. Mistakes are okay. If you're not prepared to be wrong, you're never going to come up with anything original. And creativity is really applied imagination, putting your imagination to work. And I think that all of us who have been in a flow state while photographing can recognize that photography and creativity is a process, not an event. It's not like you all of a sudden wake up and say, today I'm going to be creative. It's much more about embracing a process. So, how do you generate ideas? Where do you start? And it seems to me that great photographic projects have a reason for being. So here's the basis of where I'm headed this evening. Who are you? What are you curious about? What is your story? Why do you think the way you do, and why do you behave the way you do? Those last two might be questions your spouse might ask you, spouse or partner, but, why do you think that? Why do you behave that way? But really, I'm asking you about you. So here's the thing, I can distribute this. I was going to try and do it through the chat, but it doesn't seem to want to work to distribute this through the chat. This is a worksheet that I use with my photo workshop students. And again, normally when I do this live, I pass these out. Everybody spends a little time with them, but and I'll see if I can figure out how to get this out to you with a link or something here and at the end. I tried to stick it in the chat. I'm not sure why, but I can't do that right now. So anyway, so the basic idea here is, who are you? What do you care about? And how can your photographs express that interest? So what is it that you are particularly interested in, right? And a concept that writers learn is write what you know. So what I have people do is write down, and I would encourage you to do this right now if you got a writing utensil nearby or your thumbs on your phone or whatever. Write down some stuff that you really care about. Could be members of your family, could be a place that you really like to go. It could be something that you really love to do. I really care about cooking. I really care about growing my own vegetables. I really care about my pet. I really care about this place that I get to go every Sunday afternoon. I care about my children, my parents, my whatever, right? So the bigger the list, the better you are. The better you are, better off you are. Not the better you are, the better off you are, right? So literally make a list of things that you care about. What do you care about in life? What are the things that are important to you? And certainly we've all had a lot of time to think about all this stuff during this pandemic time. Once you've completed that list of what's important, find at least one item on that list that pulls you in and offers up possibilities for photographs. It doesn't matter what it is, because the photographs are going to come based on the idea that you're going to generate here. So how can you tell the story of that passionate interest in pictures? So here I am down, I guess I can't point because of how I've shared this, but pointing at my screen down about 3/4 of the way down. What are you interested in talking about? What does this body of work look like in your imagination? And what is the tone that you want the body of work to take? Positive, negative, romantic, ambiguous. We heard earlier about weight, right? It's a great thing. I'm interested in figuring out how to make these pictures look heavy, right? How do I do that, right? So you can either screenshot this or I'll send you, that's a PDF. I can send it to your president. You guys can distribute it or however you want to do it, or I'll send a link to it on my Dropbox, which I probably should have done earlier, but didn't think of that because for some reason I can't put it in the chat. I tried it earlier.
Jeff,
So
I was just going to interject. It's easy if you want to send me a PDF, I can distribute it to just the membership from our list.
beautiful. And I'm happy to have it everywhere too, if anybody wants to toss it out to friends and relations or whatever. So this to me is the well. It's the well that you get to go back to. Who are you? What do you care about? And how might you translate that passion for person, place, thing into photographs? How might you do that? So one of the things that I've learned over the years about photography is that there's an ongoing battle of idea versus subject. Idea always wins. An idea produces a photograph that has power. Subject is a picture of that thing. So the idea is really the key. What I'm wanting to encourage you to do is to make work about something rather than of something. So if you begin to talk about the photographs, these pictures, this set of images, whether it's a set of images that's 3 or 300, doesn't matter. This set of images is about this. It might be of something else, but it's about something. And when we think about, in your head, when you think about the photographs that have moved you over your lifetime, the photographs perhaps that made you embrace photography as a thing that you do every day or every week or every month, it's the pictures that have an underlying feeling about them rather than that's a picture of a place that I went once, right? So I want you to think about making work about something rather than of something. Another thing that I think is important for all photographers to think about is another ongoing battle. And for a lot of photographers, this is another big sticking point. The subject versus idea is one, and single images versus groups of images is another, and groups of images always wins, right? Certainly, every one of us can put together a greatest hits set of pictures. Here are my favorite pictures that I made this year, right? Or this month, or on this trip. But better is a set of pictures that taken together flesh out a bigger story than a single image of this, and then another image of that, and another image of that. So in the battle between single images versus groups of images always win. Always. Always win. You're not going to find somebody who's going to give you a significant exhibition or publication space in a publication because you've made 20 really good pictures that have nothing to do with one another. It's more important that the pictures have a story to tell, and that story is your story, right? And I know that we all, I see it all the time. There's a number of photographers whose work I look at and I say, gosh, darn it, he came up with that great idea. I wish I'd thought of that great idea. And instead, what I do is I go back to that well. I go back to that list of what do I really care about? What is it that really speaks to me in this world? And then I photograph that. And those pictures end up becoming a group of images, and that group of images begin to tell a story. So I'm encouraging you to tell engaging stories with a project, because multiple images cohesively presented work better than single images. And certainly, we're all going to have the single images that we're going to hang on the wall in our living room or in our studio, or maybe even sell to somebody to hang in their space. But from the point of view of growing as a photographer and of pushing yourself forward as a photographer, telling engaging stories with a project by using multiple images presented cohesively to tell a bigger story is going to get you farther than that one greatest hit image that you're going to make. So what do I mean by cohesive presentation? So let me give you some examples. Using printed images, it might be an exhibition. It might be a boxed portfolio. Those of us who've been around photography for a very long time will remember these as being sort of the ultimate, sort of goal of photography. It was to make a boxed set, a boxed portfolio. They kind of fell to the wayside, but I know a bunch of photographers who are making these now in a very beautifully presented clamshell box, a group of pictures that has a story to tell. A folio of images. This is a folio that Brooks Jensen produced out of the Evidence of Hands-on Stonework a number of years ago. And then I've made a bunch of other portfolios on my own, small folios of images that I've distributed to friends. Um, I give them away. I use them as promotional pieces. I do a lot of different things with them. But a small folio of small images can go a long way. And of course, print-on-demand books, from Blurb and others like them, are extremely powerful to use in a number of different ways. I know a lot of photographers who use very small Blurb books as giveaways at portfolio reviews, so that the reviewer goes back when we get back to in-person portfolio reviews. The portfolio reviewers goes back with a small book of some of the images that they saw. So print presentation tools, whether it's exhibition, portfolio, folio, print-on-demand books, and online presentation tools, Adobe PDF. I know a lot of photographers who've embraced that. I have a friend, an Italian photographer friend, who each month puts together a beautifully presented group of images in a PDF and sends them out to his mailing list. Adobe Spark Page, I love. In fact, I used to use My Album more than Spark Page, but Spark Page has gotten better and better, so I'm using it more often to create a cohesive presentation online, rather than just like, here's my website, here's a bunch of images, or here's my Instagram feed, here's a bunch of images. If you look at my Instagram feed, it kind of looks like I'm all over the map. But each one of those pictures, not each one, but many of those pictures represent a single image in a group of pictures that I've produced a small project about, right? YouTube and Vimeo, also a possibility of presenting your images. And I liked the Adobe Spark video that was shown at the beginning of the evening here. So that was neat. Ebooks are available to us, and lots of different authoring tools that are available to make ebooks now. And then curated websites, another sort of, in some ways, holy grail. And I've just put up a few of them. Flack Photo has kind of morphed into a different thing now. But curated websites, meaning that it's different from Instagram, where you can put anything you want there. But a curated website, and I hope you know about Lens Scratch and Lens Culture, where those websites there's a gatekeeper, somebody who's helping to sort of curate the work that is being put there. They're a great resource for you to look at, but also great sort of goals for you to have. So if you've created an idea, now what? What do you do next? And my answer is to dig deeper. Dig deeper. It's photographed by Louis Palou, who's, not sure. This is from a body of work that he did about mining. Great photographer, journalistic photographer. Dig deeper to find greater substance and meaning. And what do I mean by that? And what I mean is research. Research. Now, for a lot of photographers, this is just like one of those things that they go, wait a second, research? Didn't I, sort of last time I did that was in college or high school when I did a research paper? Maybe. But research is a key component of making a project that is personal to you. So what do I mean by research? What I mean is look everywhere for people who are or have dealt with a topic like yours. So, I've spent a lot of time over the last few months, many months now, 10 months, 9 months, photographing water, because I was right next to Lake Superior, right? I photographed it in its liquid state, in its frozen state, snow, et cetera, and I started to look at all the different things that water has meant to artists, listening to, water music, right? Handel's water music, looking at paintings of water, reading poetry about water, looking at other photographers who've made projects about water. The more research you do, the more you'll learn about what other people have done with this idea. and push that idea forward. And the deeper you go, the more you'll find nuances of your subject that you might not have thought of before. So research is an important thing. I mean, if you are photographing, and God, we live in such an astonishing time, right? If you're photographing in a particular place, we can go online and find the hashtags of all those places that we've been and look at what other photographers have done, and think about how that works, right? So another thing that I think is important for you to do is to begin to look at your audience. Who's going to be interested in this work? And I look at it as concentric circles, right? So your family, probably first, your friends, your photo peers, competitions. I hope some of you are entering competitions and having conversations with galleries and publications about publishing your work. And it doesn't just happen generally, it doesn't happen overnight. It's not like you can say, walk into the gallery and say, I want you to show my work. Generally speaking, you're going to have a conversation over time with a gallerist or a publisher of a magazine or an online publication. So begin to think about what your audience is and who's going to be looking at this work. One of the things that I hadn't even thought of when I started working on this architectural project in Italy was that architects would care. Well, of course they would. Of course they would, because many of the places I was going and many of the things that I was photographing were about things that an architect would have studied during their studies. And then lastly, I wanted to talk about practical considerations, because, I've got a life, right? And integrating creative process into your life. Being creative is not about dropping everything to do your creative work, but rather is about living a life that is driven by curiosity. I have a friend who says, your art isn't your life. Your life is your art. Living an artful life every day, living a life that's driven by curiosity. And of course, we all have to deal with the clock and the calendar and all the other junk that we're having to do. And money, of course, we have to budget time and resources for our creativity. And I think if we spent more on experiences than we spend on photographic equipment and gear, we'd all be a lot better off. Buying a ticket to somewhere now that we're starting to be able to travel again. Just in the last couple of days, it seems as though travel to Italy is starting to free up again. I'm pretty excited about that. So whatever gear you have right now is going to make great photographs, rather than thinking about, I need this piece of equipment to make those pictures. Unless you say to yourself, what I really need is that hyper real quality of a view camera, but I sold all my view camera equipment a bunch of years ago, as I told my group of photo friends here, so, go rent one or buy one or borrow one from a friend, but make up for your lack of gear by digging deeper and going deeper into the subject at hand, the subject that you want to do. So nurturing creativity by trying new foods, listening to music, reading voraciously, traveling, visiting museums and hardware stores, going to the theater, changing your sleep habits. One of the things that I discovered in this last 9 months is I started getting up at really odd hours of the night to photograph the night sky, something I'd never really done before. And that changed everything, changed my perspective about the way I was engaging with photography. Take a different way home from work. Talk to strangers. Ignore what your mom said. Go ahead and talk to strangers. Especially now, isn't it nice to be able to start to get back out and have a conversation with somebody who's not the one person you've been with for the last 10 or 12 months. So, all right, that's what I have. Hopefully I didn't go too much over, but we can take some time to have some Q&A and see where we wind up if anybody has questions.
I have a question.
Okay. I have two questions right off for you, Jeff.
Jump in there, Ray.
So we just saw a whole slew of your photographs, and one of your questions, and I'm kind of curious. So, what's your one sentence answered about what you care about?
That's a good question, because if I showed you my list, it's big, right? But the built environment is super important to me. And it always has been from the time I can remember, like when I think back to remembering my childhood experiences in my room when I was a kid. But also the natural world, sort of, it's kind of like these two opposing places in the world. So the natural world and the built environment, and the two different ways that I can see the world around me in certain ways. You know, an example that I can give you, because it's a project that I am still kind of fleshing out and working on, is trees that are friends of mine that I've made portraits of. Right. So I'm approaching, they're trees that I see all the time on these certain walks that I do. And I've seen them all the time for 30 years. And I've been photographing some of them for a long time, but I'm approaching them like portrait subjects. I'm taking lighting gear into the woods. I'm lighting them in a certain way. And I'm, you know, it sounds a little crazy, because, you know, we're all artists and we're a little crazy, but I'm making a series of portraits of trees because I discovered that they were friends of mine. And I didn't think about it that way before. And trees was a thing that was on my list.
Nice. And my second question is about the project thing you talked about. And I have mixed feelings about that, in a sense, because oftentimes if a person is told that you need to come up with a project and shoot to that project, it turns into a gigantic block. And I find that it can be equally successful, and what's been successful for me is to photograph what interests me, and the project comes later after I look at that sort of disoriented bit of work. But if I try to create a project, and I know photographers that do this, and they find a quote that they think is cool, or that they find is moving to them, and then they spend the next year or two or whatever photographing to this project. And it creates an assignment and a reason to make photographs. But for a lot of people, and including some of my students as an educator, it creates a gigantic block.
So I would say that what you're doing is it just like going at it the same way, but from the back end, right?
Sure.
I mean, you're just sort of doing it the back end. I've done that too. I think one of the coolest parts about the software we get to use now is keywords. Like, you know, if every picture of a cloud that you've ever made is keyworded cloud, and then you sort on cloud, holy crap, there's a project right there. And then, you know, subsets of colors within that, you know, or if every picture is, you know, has, you know, a keyword of, I don't know, trees or water or waves or, you know, sand or, you know, whatever. I mean, I think that's a way of going at the project, but sort of from the back end, right? Instead of saying, I'm going to go do a project about about this, and I'm going to tell you, I don't do it in a linear way, right? You know, I started a project in the too late in the fall of about, and I'm trying to figure out where it's going to go, but it's tree roots that have grown into rocks, and trees that have been my friends since I was a child, that I remember this tree growing out of this set of rocks, and the roots, there's no dirt, the roots are going inside the rock to find nourishment inside the rock. And I'm researching about how these trees get like that. They're mostly cedar trees. You know, why are they like that, et cetera, et cetera. So that all then becomes like the sort of the fodder that, and then, you know, I started the project too late in the fall, and then all of a sudden, you know, it starts to snow and I can't get at it. So anyway, another question.
Jeff, I have a question.
Brian.
The process ends with the word inspiration. You had a whole series, and then it's grasping and nurturing and inspiration. I'm a musician, and there's real debate in the music world about that word inspiration, because it suggests that there's a moment where you're being discerning and you don't fall in love with every one of your ideas. You have to pick and choose your moment, because there's going to be that magic when you're ready. And then when that inspiration strikes, you start to grasp and you start to nurture and you start to work and you build ideas around it. But the idea of inspiration generally as a starting point, and I know you put it at the end, is a real block for creative people, because we can't help but look back, right? We don't copy people, but we definitely are inspired by people. So when we look around at all of the nature photography, when I look around at all of the photography surrounding the coast or the ocean or waves or or stop motion photography of waves or long exposure of waves, everybody seems to have had an idea. And then the inspiration is, how do I discern and become my own voice? And the debate, at least in music, is you put in the work and you forget about inspiration, because you're going to find yourself somewhere that you weren't the day before. And then you will start to find yourself. Do you believe that philosophy, or do you believe the other side of the argument, that you sort of work toward inspiration? Does that make sense?
It does. And I'm gonna quickly share my screen again, just to like sort of say, when I talk about inspiration, what I mean is this list of stuff you care about. You know, what I'm really talking about is, like, if you say to yourself, I really care about these things, and you know, I think that becomes inspiration, right? And so I'm not talking about, like, you know, the God rays come down on my head and, you know, light me up like you know, like Jake Elwood in Blues Brothers, you know,
right,
get the spirit and lift up to the ceiling. I'm really talking about, like, finding that nugget that speaks to you as an image maker. So I'm not necessarily talking about, like, you know, I don't know. I guess it was you who, you know, you turned and saw the surfers in that light, right? And you went, holy crap, that was, like, you know, and that's an inspirational moment. So now here's my question. If I were sort of, you know, the king of your castle, I'd say, well, okay, that picture of the surfers was interesting to me because of the light, because of the moment, and because of these guys and the shapes of their boards and so forth and so on. So what happens if I go back and start looking at surfers, and surfers in particular light, and surfers dripping with, you know, salt water and
their gear and
yeah,
all that.
So like, that one little thing, that little nugget of you going, oh, look at that, is now potentially a springboard for that. Like, you might not have been interested in surfing before. And I don't know, like, I'm thinking in my head about Joni Sternbach. Do you know her? You know, you all know her work. You know, like, Carol's nodding her head. You know, like, this is a woman who's been photographing surfers now for, I don't know how long, Carol, a decade maybe, in tintype. You know, Jesus, they're freaking nuts, these pictures. And she just was on the beach one day taking pictures and suddenly started, you know, hanging out with these surfers, and now she's traveled around the world and has made all these, so it's about sort of recognizing that moment and then building on it. And I'm a firm believer in this whole research thing. The more you research this idea, the more you discover whether or not it's interesting to you. Like, if you can't get enough of the information about this, then you're on the right track. But yeah, it's different. It's different from the inspiration to write a song, I think. Maybe. It might not be different from the inspiration to write a thematic album's worth of music.
Yeah, I think that you're right on point, because the idea is to get moving, and inspiration can often be a roadblock because you're sitting there waiting for something to move you. And I guess what you're saying is the research into what you already know is a part of you, or what moves you, will put you in a more and more, I guess, inspired state to go deeper, to research, to look, to dig, all those other things that you said around inspiration, versus just waiting for that magic to sort of happen and then go, wow, that'll never come back. And what you're saying is it's always there. You just have to keep moving through it, right?
Yep, I think that's exactly right. And as photographers, hell, we all go out with our cameras thinking, I'm going to go take some pictures today, right? It's kind of one of the joys of the medium for us, is that it's a way for us to just, who was it who said that golf is a good walk spoiled, or something like that?
Twain.
Mark Twain. Yeah. So photography is a really great excuse for me to make sure I get out and move myself around the world every day, or as often as I can. So, I think that what I'm aiming at is to say, okay, if I keep noticing the same things over and over again, or if I notice that if I walk in the afternoon as opposed to in the morning, I see things in a different way, or really close to where I have this house in Michigan, I have a bunch of trails, and I typically walk them in one direction, but geez, what happens when I walk in the other direction is pretty astonishing to me. So, what happens when I see that tree approaching me from a different way? Or, when I go to a different beach, when I go to a different rock to photograph.
Excellent. Thank you.
Other questions?
I would just add to the discussion, and part of what I hear you saying is that it's useful to slow down. And so, for example, if you like a photograph of surfers on the beach, I hear you say get more interested in other aspects of surfers on the beach or surfing. And it reminds me of a time when I was traveling in Thailand, and I was traveling with somebody who I didn't know that well. And he asked me, well, what's your plan for what you want to see in Thailand? And I said, oh, well, I want to go to Koh Samui, and I want to go to Chiang Rai, and here and there and so forth. And what he said to me was, slow down. In each place that you're going, spend more time experiencing what happens, letting whatever might happen, instead of going to this place and this place and this place. And it was the best lesson I ever got. And I think that's what
You sound like me at the beginning of my Italian photo workshops. Mm-hmm. The objective is not to make as many photographs as you can. The objective is to make photographs that have some relationship to one another and ultimately can be a little body of work. And that's actually what we work on in a week's time. And it's very frustrating to some of the photographers who come along with me. I had one guy, and like, what do you want to accomplish? What do you want to learn? And he said, I don't care about learning anything. I just want to make 12 pictures that will win my camera club competition each month next year. Like, and you know what he did? he did just that. And then at the end, when I asked him to make a story, it kind of fell apart because he couldn't, because he was, he was trying to, what he was really trying to do, he had a notebook, and in the notebook, he had pictures that he'd gathered from Flickr of the exact subjects from an exact point of view from the places that he knew we were going to go. And he wanted to take those pictures. It's like, okie doke, but it does nothing to do with you. And what we wind up with is, in the end, most of the time is, my groups are never more than 7. So we usually have, 6 or 7 exactly different points of view of exactly the same places that everybody went. But man, most of the time you would never know that these were all people traveling together and working together in some set of locations in some place in Italy. So because of this strategy that we try to employ. And for sure they go home with greatest hit images, but for sure they also go home with a little slideshow that is a cohesive set of pictures, except for that one guy.
Yeah, Jeff, I think that makes me think of the constraints that we all naturally have in our, each of us individually have. We all have something that holds us back. For me, it's with photography. I guess I come late into photography, well into the digital age, and don't have a background in fine arts or anything. But to me, I was drawn to photography to capture beauty and what I perceive as beautiful. And so my constraint is, I want to make, pretty pictures. But, the more I listen to photographers and learn about photography and so forth, the more I think that that's, not, I don't know how to express it. It's not really, art, because it's just me, looking for pretty things. And somebody put it recently who went to a portfolio review and presented his images. Apparently the reviewer said something like, the images can't just be sublime. And I kind of hear that's what you're saying too, that, beyond beauty, it has to tell a story. It has to, be a cohesive whole in a series and so forth. So how does one, I know dig deep and all the other advice you gave us, but how do you get to the point where you're going beyond, what kind of constrains you to the next level of getting this kind of meaningful, project going, or, a series of these meaningful images that, are cohesive and together tell a story. That's the hard thing to do for
Or
someone.
with even one image.
Or yeah.
I'm just going to say that first of all, do not knock yourself for making pretty pictures.
Yeah.
Right? I like to think that most, if not, many of my pictures are pretty. I hope they are. I hope I learned something about how to make something that's pleasing. But I also, I think that the answer to that is in part thinking thematically, thinking, like, okay, I made this pretty picture in this place. Can you go back to that place? That, that's a helpful thing, is to be able to go back to that place. I did a whole still life project during the early days of the pandemic. I was stranded in Italy at the beginning of the pandemic because I was there teaching a semester for the University of Georgia, and they sent the students home after a month. And my wife and I decided, well, what the hell? We got a paid up apartment. You know, how bad can it be? You know, so we stayed until it was apparent that, you know, we might not be able to come home until, like, for example, now. So this was March of 2020. We eventually came home, but we were actually sequestered in our apartment. We were only allowed to go out to go the, you know, 100 meters or so to the grocery store and back, and that was it. There were police standing out there, and you had to fill out a form, and it was a long, you know. So I started a still life project. I'd go to Roberto and I'd say, you know, I don't really care what it tastes like. I'm looking for pretty stuff, right? And so he'd like, and he was like my, you know, Roberto, the frutovendolo, the fruit vendor. You know, he was like my partner in crime, and he had like a little shelf of stuff that he'd save aside for me. They like, look at this one, look at that. And so I did like this still life project, and began then to look at still life images, many of which I'd already seen live in museums throughout my time in Italy. But I began to research, you know, still life, Renaissance, Baroque still life. What did they look like? You know, what kind of lighting did they use? I had lighting gear with me, so I could, you know, so like I took one picture and I said, well, that's pretty neat. So then I made a little body of work, you know, like 10 pictures that were, you know, sort of Renaissance inspired still life images, and wrote about that, because I think writing is another way to sort of flesh these ideas out. And when I do send this thing around through Doug, and that he can send to you guys, literally with a pencil or a pen, writing it down is super important. You know, we tend to type everything. My handwriting's just got awful, but you know, writing it down, even if it's just block letters, and then writing ideas behind each of these things. So what about that pretty picture is interesting to you? You know, is it about the place that you were? Is it about, you know, what it made you feel like when you were in that place? Do other people who look at that picture say, man, I want to go to that place? You know, like I want to go to, Giannis has a background there. I want to go to wherever it is in that, you know, background, sort of wine cellar. I'm thinking that's a picture of the background as opposed to where you actually are. And because if it is where you actually are, I'm going, you know. Yeah. Like, give me the address, I'll be right there, because we got some work to do in that wine cellar. So I mean, I think writing is useful, but I think, you know, really just like sort of looking at that pretty picture and going, well, what else can I do with this? What else can it mean? You know, how else can it be? You know, I think Doug mentioned something about an Ansel Adams exhibition that is near where you are. And, you know, one of the things about Adams that we always forget, because we just concentrate on his, you know, his sort of greatest hits images, but we forget that he made bodies of work of certain things, right? You know, he made Yosemite in the Range of Light, and he made it to put together his ideas, his thoughts, his story about that place in his life, right? So I've signed up for the Stu Levy thing on Wednesday, but I don't think I can actually physically be online at that time. But I signed up because most of these things, people are recording them and putting them out there later. So at least I would get the link to the video, I hope, later. So I might see some of you there.
You won't get a link, but you could find it on the museum's YouTube page later.
Okay, cool. That's what I'm looking for. So.
Jeff, I have from the wine cellar, I have a question. This is Giannis. Question about like concept and beautiful pictures. Is like, I worked on a series of images that dealt with concept, for example, like fear. And I created an image, actually entered my very first competition, and it won first place, but it's not a beautiful image. And like I come from a painter background, master's degree, studied with painters that created, well, a whole array of images, some of them absolutely beautiful, others very conceptual. And so I struggle with like the balance between concept and you were talking about maybe subject and then beautiful. And it's, I'm very much struggling with the balance between those two.
Man, some of the, you know, I like, as much as I like to celebrate beauty as well, but you know, I'm like, in my head, I'm just thinking Nan Golden, Nan Golden. Do you guys know her work, Nan Golden? You know, those pictures are no way beautiful, but boy, are they something else. You know, a lot of them are just like terrifying to look at. You know, because they're about drugs and addiction, and you know, they're about like really powerful subject matter. They're powerful pictures because of how she's accomplishing it. But you know, she gets the message across. They're not, you know, you wouldn't look at it and say, man, I'd love to have that over my sofa, as you know, with somebody with a rubber tube tied around their arm and a needle in it. But you know, it does communicate in a certain way. So, and if you just look at one picture, you go, wow, that's tough. But if you look at a dozen of them all, you know, together, or you know, I'm trying to think of who's the photographer who did Knife and Gun Club. Larry somebody. Anyway, look up that project. You'll find it, Knife and Gun Club, and it's about, you know, operating rooms, emergency operating rooms, and you know, they're hard edged, but they're not pretty, but man, they're powerful. So, and they're conceptually linked together by being about a common idea, not a common subject, not one person, but you know. Or you know, Eugene Smith, you know, a great master, right? Eugene Smith's pictures, some of them are hard to look at, but you know, the Minamata. I haven't heard much more about that. Has anybody seen anything about this Johnny Depp playing Eugene Smith rather?
I haven't heard that. It's Eugene Richards did the Knife and Gun Club.
Knife and Gun Club. Thank you, Eugene Richards. So
come out here. I'll put it on mute and you can go. Oh, they can see me. No, they can't, because I have a background.
There you go. They can't see me. We could tell her we can see her. We could just say, we see you.
Well, you know, I'm at the beach and my wife's in the other room. We're in a hotel. And so I'm sitting in the bathroom. Oh, and now she has to go to the bathroom.
Oh no! Well, just turn off your camera for a while, because
yeah, well,
modesty matters.
That's a great shower.
Okay, well, maybe it's time for me to depart.
Say, Jeff, it's Walt. How you doing? Good to see you.
Nice to see you.
Yeah, and I'm so glad that you did this tonight, because I've waited. It's about a year, hasn't it, since?
Yeah, I'm not sure what. Yeah, we were going to do it, and then it didn't work out, or something. I don't remember, but yeah, it's nice to. And you know, I finally. This is good too, because I'm back in you know, Wisconsin, where I live, where I have an actual good internet connection, as opposed to the sort of dicey one up in the North Woods. It works, but it doesn't always work. So,
well, I wanted to say thank you for doing this, and also for everybody in PPF, that monthly photo challenge. You are the source of our Adobe Spark, because when I first was investigating photography workshops in Italy, And I came across you several years ago, many years ago. I saw some of the work you'd done on your own websites with ebooks and other publications. And I went back and saw the Spark pages that you've done. And that's when I first contacted you, said, gee, I don't know anything about Spark. What is it? And can we use it? Because we were dying here at
I'll
PPF
tell
trying
you.
to find something to display our images every month.
And you would think that it would be way easier, right? You
yeah.
would think that, and actually, I had used an application called Sound Slides, and then it kind of went belly up. But the guy has brought it back, so check that out. Sound Slides. It's pretty neat. But Spark works great because the problem is, for me, I want to be able to have the student concentrate on the pictures, not the, I don't want them to spend 3 days trying to put together a video, teaching them how to use video software, blah, 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 blah. So, because my workshops, we do spend a little time on post-production. And I figure, why would you spend all kinds of time and money to go to Italy and then sit in a dark room learning how to use Lightroom? Julianne Cost will teach you how to use Lightroom online for free. From your house, from your hotel bathroom.
Well, I'll also give you a shameless plug here for your podcast, because I think the history of photography was phenomenal. I loaded every one of them onto my iPad, and it's a great daily lesson in photography. And then the Camera Position podcast is very inspirational. Those are nice to digest with a cup of coffee too. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for listening. Like the history of photography thing, I'll give you the short version of how that happened. I had a half the class who was going to go on a field trip to with a different photo class, and they couldn't come to my class. So I said, well, I'll record it. And then I thought, well, I'll put it on the internet. And podcasting was just getting started back in like 2004, 2005. And so I said, well, nobody's going to really be interested in listening to history of photography lectures, but it turned out that during the time that I taught the class at least once a semester for 30 years. And so, and of course it evolved because the history evolved, but I never thought that I would have during the sort of heyday of the thing, 20,000, 25,000 people a week were listening to this thing. And it really kind of amazed me. And what really amazed me was that my teaching colleagues, I've been very involved in SPE over the years, Society for Photographic Education. Are you a member of that, Ray? You nod your head. You're muted. I just looked. So
I've spoken at a few of their conventions.
Yeah. So, but I'm always surprised at how many of my teaching colleagues who only teach it maybe once every 2 or 3 years say how grateful they are for having like this thing online that they can use to brush up on the history of photography. So if you're underfed on the history of photography, there's a whole semester out there, and they're video presentations. So all the visuals are alongside my lecture component. So
Jeff,
thanks.
I can see how you're a successful podcaster. Not only do you have great content, but you have a marvelous radio voice.
Well, that's all because I have all of this gear here. I sound a little like Minnie Mouse in reality. No, this is my real voice. So wouldn't that be nice?
Microphone.
Yeah, it's actually, I don't know what this one is. I've got a bunch of them. This one's the one that I use at this desk. So anyway, well, thanks for having me. I don't know if anybody has any other questions. I'm happy to keep chattering, but I appreciate your attention, your time. And I'll send this thing out to Doug, and Another thing that I'll send that I have that might be useful to you is a PDF that's like sort of all the resources that I have online, so you don't have to like try and figure out where they all are, because I got a bunch of stuff. I found that if you give away a lot of stuff comes back to you. So.
Well, Jeff, thank you so much for the presentation. That was a really interesting and sort of a good topic for us, challenging all of us to think a little bit more about what inspires us to do what we do, and really enjoyed it. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Take pictures about something, not of something. That's the
It was
watch.
fantastic, Jeff. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks to you guys. All right.
Well done.
Thanks, everyone.
Ciao.
See you later.
Thank you.